We hope you enjoy this episode of the Modern Arizona podcast. But first, an important message for our listeners.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Arizona podcast. You may have noticed we recently changed our name from the Modern Divorce Podcast to the Modern Arizona Podcast. Recently, our topics have gotten broader than simply divorce and family law related into topics that all Arizona families, professionals, and individuals might care about. So in keeping with our expanded scope and what you, our listeners, want to listen to, we are now the Modern Arizona Podcast. Hello, this is Billie Tarascio, owner of Modern Law. We are a family law firm in Phoenix, Arizona with offices throughout the state. We've got attorneys who can help you with every aspect of your family law case. We have a legal clinic run by students for those of you who need budget-friendly resources. And we've got lawyers who've been practicing for more than 20 years. Collectively, Modern Law has more than 200 years of attorney experience. So when you hire Modern Law, you're not just getting an attorney, you are getting a team. If you live in Arizona and you need representation, call us at Modern Law today. That's 480-649-2905, 480-649-2905, or visit us at mymodernlaw.com. Hello and welcome to the Modern Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Billie Tarascio, today joined by Nikki Tucker of The Firm Approach, and we're going to be talking about what women need to know about financial planning, setting themselves up for success, especially if they are headed for divorce. Nikki is the owner of The Firm Approach, and she is a personal financial coach and a certified divorce financial analyst. Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Happy to have you here. This is one of my favorite topics, being a woman who likes to empower other women who, I just hate seeing what happens to so many women who do not take care of themselves financially.
I do too. And that's exactly why we're here. It's something I'm really passionate about. I think it's really important for women to be unapologetic about protecting their financial security and financial peace of mind. So I can talk about it all day, every day.
Love it. So how did you find yourself in this niche?
Well, I have always been in love with finance. So it's been my thing since I was a kid, quite honestly. I was a nerdy kid that played with the 10 key calculators that had the rolling tape and all of that kind of stuff. And then I realized that I'm not fit for accounting. So I decided to go into finance. So I majored in finance in college. I have an MBA. And after I got steady in my career in financial services in the corporate world, I started to notice that some of my friends, family, or their friends and family who were really successful women were in unhappy marriages. And they had all of these thoughts and ideas about why they could not get a divorce. And a lot of it had to do with money related things or legal related things that honestly just weren't true. So I would be listening to some of these stories, and I wasn't a CDFA at the time, thinking, that's not accurate. You saying that you don't want to get a divorce because he said he's not going to pay child support. That's not how that works, right? And so it actually made me really curious, and I decided to just dig deeper into the niche of divorce and helping women in particular getting out of unhappy marriages and being happy on the other side. Really approaching it from the financial perspective, though.
Okay, so then do you work mostly with married women?
I work with women in general, so it's pre-divorce.
Mhm.
I consult with women during divorce and post-divorce, so they're not always married. And actually, most of my clients are post-divorce. So usually
Okay.
they find me after, and then they say, "I wish I had known about you," which is very common. And then we still work on what they can do to just shore up their finances and improve the way that they manage their money now that they again are not only still the breadwinner, but now primary or only breadwinner.
Okay, so let me just ask you about some different scenarios. If you've
Mhm.
got a couple, they're getting married out of college. They both have MBAs. They both intend to have successful careers. Um, they, maybe husband starts out earning wife and then wife ends up out earning husband, but they're both fairly close. Let's say they make, between 150 and 170,000 each. One makes more than the other. What type of advice would you give to that couple to structure their finances?
So I start off the conversation with figuring out how financially compatible you are. So
Mm,
just because you have similar career goals
or make the same
and
amount of
or
money.
you make the same amount of money does not automatically equate to being financially compatible. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that you need to be more intentional and you need to have better discussions. And especially if you want to decrease the fights about money in your marriage, you want to have very intentional conversations early on. So, one of the simplest things that a couple can do before they get married and obviously during their marriage is have financial conversation and uncomfortable financial conversation. So this is more than what's your credit score or where do you bank? Like we're asking about how do you feel about money? Are there things that you're unhappy about or happy about with the way that you manage money? What are your expectations with how we will manage our money? What do you think about retirement? Just all of these different things. And those conversations should continue, as I mentioned, to happen while you're married. So I like to recommend that couples have date nights, but money date nights. So just not the night on the town where you have a great dinner and a movie, but once a week or once a month, whatever makes sense for your situation, to set up dedicated time to have transparent, open communication. So that's the first part. Just again, figuring out how compatible you are or are not, and then what you can do about that. And then the second piece is the tactical functional part of it. So I'm a huge proponent of everyone having their own money. It's fine that you have joint accounts and all of that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do think it's important for you to have separate accounts that each individual is responsible for managing on their own. So I'll stop talking. I feel like I said a lot, but that's my initial guidance.
I mean, you said a lot. You said a lot. I don't know how people I don't know. In my marriage, we were not financially compatible. And that 100% absolutely contributed to the breakdown of the marriage. And now I don't even want to talk about it. I just want to keep the stuff. I just want to keep it separate. I don't even know what financial compatibility would look like because it feels like such a risk.
I think that learning how to merge your finances is an art form, right? So there's no right or wrong way to do it. And there is some risk associated with it, especially if you're really established. So if you are established in your life, you have a lot of assets, or maybe even if you have a lot of debt, right? There is some risk associated with that. So I won't, throw that to the side. But what I'll say is if you have the right conversations, and especially if you can have like a money coach or someone else involved that acts as a neutral party, similar to therapy. If you're having the right conversations, then you're making way for things that you wouldn't necessarily be accounting for going into the marriage. So one part more dominant than the other from a personality perspective? If one partner tends to overtalk the other and the other partner is always compromising, there's a possibility that you'll do something what's called like money cloning. So that means you're assuming the behaviors and the money story of your partner just because you get dominated in the relationship. And so your individual identity gets lost because the person who's more dominant, again, tends to kind of overpower everything and you start operating under their money philosophies, which are not your own. And so now you become a bit resentful and upset, and other disastrous things may happen depending, again, on how they manage money. So being mindful that that can happen and then coming up with the strategies, again, similar to strategies that you may have when you're going through therapy, couples therapy, premarital counseling, whatever it is, to say, my voice is not being heard. And I want to make sure that you understand what I want, what I intend to do, and where we need to compromise. So that's one piece. Another thing I would say is just understanding what your triggers are. So, as you mentioned, you were previously married and it wasn't the best experience. You had a lot of fights about money. So that's going to be something that you're very sensitive about going into another relationship or considering marriage, right? And again, merging finances. So you have to have conversations about that and understand what your individual triggers are and see what you can do to kind of mitigate that risk.
I really okay, so you also said a lot there, a lot. Um, the first thing that you were talking about was, where the more dominant partner really kind of makes all the decisions and someone, the more passive or get along partner, the more chill partner just goes along with it. They may not be making any decisions. They just do kind of what they're told and they can end up, resentful, but also in terrible financial space if their partner doesn't manage money well. So that's a huge risk. What is the balance that people, you said everybody should have their own account. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Everybody should have some freedom and some agency because the way you make and spend money is so personal. And it's just important, I think, as an adult that you have that agency. How do you balance how much of that is done by the individual versus how much is done jointly? And how are those decisions made?
A lot of it starts with just what makes sense for you as a couple. So if you know that one person is really, really good with managing money, then you probably are going to make that person the CFO, for lack of a better phrase, of your household. And so the person who doesn't love to have the conversations, for example, or doesn't want to be in the thick of it, they just need to be informed. Okay. And so if you decide to have, let's just say 3 accounts, we'll keep it very simple. So you have a joint checking account, and then you have individual checkings or savings account, whatever it is, but you have 3 accounts. Then that person that's the CFO is kind of taking all of the money into the joint account. This is one option, and then dispersing it out to the respective separate accounts, saying, okay, everybody's paycheck goes into the one account. As the financial manager, we have this money, that this dollar amount that's agreed upon, and it's going to go into our respective um, bank accounts. And that way, to your point, the person who has their own account has the freedom and the autonomy to make decisions about their individual account. And if they don't love managing day to day household stuff, they don't have to worry about it. There's a designated person to do it. So, giving someone the responsibility, and it's a huge responsibility, of managing your household finances, and they don't love it, or they hate that part, or they're not very responsible and tend to pay things late and just don't stay on top of things, that's not the job for them in most cases. The other option that you have is, instead of all paychecks going into the singular account, you can say, well, my paycheck will go into my account, your paycheck will go into your account, and then we will decide how much gets funneled up to the singular account based on what our bills are. So again, allows for a bit more discretion and autonomy in some ways, depending on what your monthly expenses are. But ultimately, there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just have to do what makes sense, and don't ignore the red flags or where someone is really weak. If they are for administrative stuff, if they don't like administrative stuff, don't push that task onto the person, because it's only going to create more frustration for you and your relationship.
I totally get that from a couple standpoint. You want to utilize your strengths and you're in a partnership and you're going to delegate duties. But as a divorce attorney, it does not always work out. And I just read a post on the support group with a woman who's got 3 kids who are autistic. She's lived in her home for 14 years. She's been separated for 7 of those years. And now her husband, has filed for divorce and is asking that she move out. And she's like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, you've been separated for 7 years. Like, shouldn't, even if you're bad at paying bills, shouldn't you get better at it? Isn't that like a crucial life skill?
It is, and I don't disagree with you. It's a skill that I think everyone should have, but I think we also have to be aligned with reality.
Right.
And humans lean away from the things that they don't enjoy doing, or they feel overwhelmed by, or even fearful of, because they don't have that habit built up. And so if they haven't done it during the 10 or 15 or 20 years that they were married, they're not very likely to dive right into it year 1 or year 2, or in this case, year 7 of a separation. That's the reality of the situation. So fundamentally, I agree with you. And that's why I think going into the marriage and building the habit in the marriage, even if you're not the person that's primarily responsible for household bills, there should be some things that you pay on your own. You have your own bank account, you have your own credit card. You pay that yourself, or the things that you like to do for fun, hobbies or whatever, or if you have a side business or something like that. Have a piece of your life that you're used to managing. It doesn't matter what the dollar amount is. So, in
Mhm.
the event that that happens, then you don't have someone who's so overwhelmed or just like even frightened by the idea of doing it that they're just not going to do it. We know that that doesn't work out well because at some point you're going to have to.
Mhm. So now let's talk to the professional women. Maybe they're getting married later in life, or maybe they're divorced. They make good money, they've got assets, and they've met the new love of their life. How do you
Yeah,
advise them that they protect themselves financially?
prenups all day long. So I just feel like prenups are not popular enough.
No.
And you hear a lot about the horror stories, which is really the exception and not the rule when it comes to prenups. And as long as they're fair, and again, they're done correctly, and you have attorneys and the right people involved in the discussions, and you're being transparent, again, you have to disclose information when you get a divorce. You have to disclose information when you get a prenup. I'd much rather do it in the prenup process than having to, finally figure out how my spouse was operating financially because I was in the dark the entire time of the marriage. So I think it's important to go into a marriage informed. And the best part about it is that it forces you to have those conversations. How are we going to manage money? How are we going to think about property that we already own, particularly, like you said, for someone who has had some success? They have a home, maybe they have children from a previous relationship. They want to protect the assets that they've earned and pass it on to those kids. They have investment accounts, bank accounts. Those are grown women problems and considerations that I think there needs to be more conversation and discussion on how that should be handled when you're going into a marriage, because it's about protecting the both of you. It's not as if a prenup only protects that one person who's been really successful. So if you think about relationships where someone maybe earns significantly less or will be stay at home mom, dad, wife, husband, whatever it is, it'd be nice to have some protections in there for them too, and a prenup can do that. So I'm definitely pro prenup.
Yeah, I almost wish that it was required. But people do funny things. I had a client many, many years ago who came in, and she had signed a prenup, and he had a lot of assets and a company, and the prenup was incredibly one-sided. But she knew what it said. And it basically said, I'm keeping what I have and anything that I build from that, which is everything. And you're waiving spousal maintenance. And that was the deal. And she had a lawyer and she signed it. And then she went on to not work for 7 years. And then you divorced her.
Those are not the kind of prenups I'm talking about. I mean, to your point, they happen, but I think you and I both agree that that is not what we're talking about as far as what is considered to be fair and in protection of both parties. That's protecting one single person and leaving someone else with a considerable amount of financial harm when they leave that relationship. No, that's a hard no for
Absolutely.
me.
Well, but from his perspective, if he knows he's marrying someone who's not going to contribute and he's older and he's not interested, like, that was the terms he put out, and she agreed to the terms and then proceeded to not do anything to take care of herself. Like, I think when we're talking about adults having adult conversations, it also means you have to take some personal accountability and responsibility for your future and your financial knowledge. And
You do,
see
and
that?
I think it's uncharted territory for a lot of women in particular,
Mhm,
humans in general, but
mhm,
especially women,
mhm.
because it's not enforced or reinforced in our homes or in our schools to put that hat on and to have that lens when we think about going into a marriage in particular. We put a heavy emphasis on the romantic relationship feelings side of marriage. And that's cool. I wouldn't recommend you marry someone you hate, right?
Yeah, right.
However, however, there is a business side of marriage. And in a case like that where you're not going to be working or you have someone that has significantly more income and assets than you do, I would hope that part of the reason they're marrying you is because you bring some kind of value to their life, whether it could be anything. If you're having
Right.
kids, that's a whole different story, but I would
Yeah.
hope that you're getting married because you like this person and you think they bring value. So to me, your contributions in a marriage, even if you're not the moneyed spouse per se, has value. So a prenup should make considerations and accommodations for the value that you're bringing and quantify that in a very reasonable and appropriate way for your individual situations in your agreement. That's it,
I
right?
love that.
So
I love that because what he was telling her with this prenup is, I do not value you as a partner because you don't bring money to the table. That is what he was telling her. And
and
she's
my response would have been, "And I will not marry you."
right, right, right. Like they
Mhm.
obviously were not in a position where necessarily they could have gotten married. I almost think it would be great if people were required to do prenups because it makes you talk about hard things and answer hard questions and really see if you're on the same page and really understand, like, how are we going to govern our marriage? What's our deal going to be?
I actually agree with you with a little bit of a twist to it. I think that you should be required to opt in or opt out. And the
Mm,
only way you can opt in or opt out is if you go through the prenup process. So
sure.
if you have the disclosures and agreements, or not agreements, but conversations, and you see all of this information and everything is laid out bare, and you still decide not to,
Hmm.
then at least you're informed. You're making
Right.
a very informed decision versus those that don't even broach the subject. And then it's like, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I agree with you. I think it should be a requirement. And even as a part of, was it really popular, premarital counseling?
Hmm.
They tend to stay away from again, the financial business side, but that
Right.
should be a part of premarital counseling because it's a big part of marriage.
Right. No, you're absolutely right because you don't need a prenup if you're knowingly opting into the construct that exists within the state, except for you might move, and then
Right.
the
Right.
construct of the state might be different. But um, so are you finding that women are open to having this discussion?
Younger women in particular. So I like to tell the story to even my friends and family. My son is 19 right now. He'll be 20 in a few months, but he's pro prenup and he's not wealthy or anything. He's a broke college student, as they say, but it's already on his mind that when he decides to get married and build a life with someone that he'll be intentional about it and whatever his financial situation is and her financial situation is at that time, they'll have the conversations about it and go into whatever agreement is appropriate for them. So I love that. And I think that there are a lot of younger women who just, whether they're experiencing the divorce of their parents
Mm,
or they are again just have more access to information because of the internet and social media, it's not as taboo to
mm,
them as
mhm,
it say 20 years ago for someone the same age. And then the other population that I think that is embracing it more are older women who have been married before and are high income earners or have accumulated a decent amount of wealth or assets that they want to protect. So again, it's still not as popular and common as I think it should be, but I do think it is more palatable for people to at least just talk about the possibility.
I agree with you. This is Billie Tarascio, owner of Win Without Law School and Modern Law. Win Without Law School is a program that operates nationally and helps people who are representing themselves or who just need more help. If you are in a family court case and you're feeling confused, you need direction, you need help figuring out questions to procedural or strategic issues, Win Without Law School can help. At Win Without Law School, you've got two experienced attorneys, me and my partner, Julie Lebenz, who can guide you through the court process and help you troubleshoot your case. You've got access to courses, planners, checklists, and live Q&A. Our live Q&A is where you can get help from us and your community. We also have a closed Facebook group just for members where you all can share your experience, share your pleadings, get advice, and mentorship. Join us today at winwithoutlawschool.com. That's winwithoutlawschool.com. I had a client contact me who had been divorced, and it was actually an opposing party. I had helped his wife divorce him, and he was now looking at getting remarried, and he wanted to talk to me about remarriage and what that would mean for him financially. And so he had this consultation with me, and I was like, you need a prenup. And he's like, I cannot go to this person that I'm going to get married to and ask her to have a prenup. And I really gave the pitch. I'm like, listen, I'll talk to both of you. I will explain to both of you the thing to protect you both. You both have your own children. It will be fair. It won't be like we're trying to get one over on anybody. It will just be a conversation. And he begrudgingly sort of allowed me to talk him into it, brought in the fiance, and they worked it out. They got a prenup, and it wasn't so scary.
That's how it should be. I think everyone's story should be like that because part of the reason that people are afraid of it and don't like the idea is because they don't understand them.
Right.
They don't understand their intention and the flexibility that you have.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks it's like this prescription
Mhm.
to get you out of a divorce or through the divorce process quicker. And it's like it's much more than that. So I think having the conversation similar to the clients that you just mentioned is a fantastic idea.
Let's talk about those couples that are financially incompatible. How can you help them structure their money within their household to save their relationship?
More things separate than joint, for sure. More things separate than joint. And again, depending on the state that you live in and different marital laws, that will automatically determine some things, especially if you don't have a prenup. But if we're talking about, are we talking about a married couple or just someone who's dating?
Let's say married couple, and
Okay.
they got a lot of money, but it's not going well, or they have a lot of income, but they don't have a lot of assets,
Okay.
and they're
All right.
financially incompatible.
So part of it is stop trying to do it on your own. You're not going to overnight become financially compatible just because you're having conversations. I get that. So part of the guidance would be you need to bring in the right experts to bridge the gap, the behavior slash communication gap to say, okay, let me be the interpreter in your relationship because clearly you all can't work this out on your own and help you guide. So I think that's a part of it. So bringing in other, whether it's a certified financial planner, a tax investment, whatever the specialty is where you see the biggest risk, if they have a lot of debt, we need to talk about basic budgeting and understanding what boundaries should be as far as how you spend your money and what you do with it. And it's not uncommon for people who have high income to spend a lot of money, right? The more you earn, the more you spend. Like there's some truth to that. So bringing in, building a bench, I think is really important. The other piece, and I mentioned it, is separating things as much as possible. So I was married for 20 years, basically. And I had a very different financial philosophy than my husband at the time. And we figured out a way to find a happy medium in that most of our stuff was separate and where we needed to come together and take care of stuff, we did. I was the person, again, that administrator, CFO in the household, but our roles were very well defined. And the boundaries as far as this is what is absolutely not acceptable from a financial perspective in our relationship, we at least agreed on that. So while I wouldn't say we were necessarily compatible and that our financial philosophies and even our values,
Mm-hmm.
as far as what we spent money on, was the
Mm-hmm.
same, there
Mm-hmm.
was enough respect for each
Mm-hmm.
other
Mm-hmm.
to find a happy medium. So I think just acknowledging and accepting your differences if you're not going to be able to be aligned, and then bringing in outside people.
I love that. I think there are probably some marriages out there, many people came into marriage with the idea that you have to have one joint account and everything that's mine, yours, mine, ours, like we're married now, right? We're one, which makes sense. That's the vows. Um, but for couples like yourselves, that could have destroyed your marriage. And by being a little flexible with, we don't have to do it that way, then it doesn't have to destroy your marriage. You don't have to have everybody make every decision joint if it's not working.
Yes. And also not having blind spots when it comes to the money. So even though I was the person managing the household, I would say, like, we need to sit down and talk about certain things. Let's look at everything we have, see if our money is kind of growing in the right direction. And even because, again, I was stronger in the financing area than he was, I would still look at his stuff if it
Mm,
was separate and say, like, oh, you have a lot of money in this account, but it's a regular savings account and it doesn't pay high interest. You should move this to like a high interest savings account, high yield savings account. Or I don't think you're putting enough money in your retirement account. Let's talk about that. So we would still have conversations, and ultimately he had the final say so, but we were partners. So again, we would talk about it.
I love that. So, how do people find you if they want to work with you?
My website. That's the best place, the easiest place. So www.thefirm. Firm has two I's. I always call that out, but it's thefirmapproach.com. And it's the best place to, whether you're signing up for the email community or taking a look at blogs and different things that we have out there. That's probably the best place. If you're into social media, I hang out on Instagram a couple times a week, but I'm busy, so I'm not there all the time.
All right, awesome. And when people work with you, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I have a digital program, and that allows someone who's on the pre divorce side to understand what the divorce experience is like. So, what can they expect? Where do they start? How can I build a team? And it answers all of those questions. How to keep the cost down. That's the digital side. And then I have my signature program, it's Bring Home the Bacon, where I work with people, very small group. It's very intentional. I'm talking to you one on one basically before you are into that program. And we're figuring out, what does post divorce life look for you financially? What's the business that you need to take care of to get off on the right foot? And who are the professionals that I can introduce you to and connect you to and make sure that happens? So that happens in Bring Home the Bacon.
Love it. Love it. Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciated meeting with you. I think women talking about money is just, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Women are making more and more money, and it's really important that we talk about it. So thank you
It,
for what you do.
I agree with you, of course, wholeheartedly. And so thank you for having me and just allowing the space to have the conversation. It's absolutely necessary.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Divorce Podcast. Remember, anything you've heard today or anything you read online is not the replacement for actual consultation with an attorney and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Even if you called in and we spoke to you, you are anonymous and we don't have your details and you have not become a client of Modern Law. However, we would love to speak with you, or you should seek out the advice of legal counsel or counseling or any other expert near you. And if you have an idea for a show topic or you need to speak with an attorney in Arizona, you can reach me at info@mymodernlaw.com.